It all started with that sinking feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when you know something's wrong, but can't quite put your finger on it. We had set out late in the day, 4 of us with heavy packs and high spirits, heading deep into the forest for a weekend trip we'd been planning for months. The trail was narrow and wound through stands of tall pines that creaked in the breeze, their needles whispering against one another like they knew some secret we didn't. By the time we found a flat patch of ground to pitch our tents, twilight had already bled into the trees, and the first stars were beginning to prick through the purple sky. It wasn't until after we'd built a fire and passed around a pot of beans that someone finally asked the question, "Hey, where's the map?" There was silence, the kind of silence that makes the crackle of burning wood sound 10 times louder. Each of us looked around at the others, waiting for someone to reach into their pack and pull it out with a grin. But no one moved. I rifled through my bag twice, then a third time, though I knew before I started that it wasn't in there. "I thought you had it," my buddy Mark said. "No," I replied, a pit forming in my chest. "I saw you fold it up back at the truck." That was the moment we realised the truth. The map, our lifeline in a maze of unfamiliar trails and dense forest, was still sitting on the dashboard of Mark's pickup. For a while, nobody spoke. The night pressed in around us, the fire giving off just enough light to make the shadows beyond seem even darker. We weren't in any real danger yet. We had food, water, and decent gear. But the thought of navigating the wilderness without that paper guide felt like stepping off a cliff with no rope. After a long pause, Sarah broke the silence. "Well, we've got the stars," she said, tilting her head back to the stretch of sky above the clearing. Sure enough, the Big Dipper was hanging just overhead, pointing its way to the North Star, steady and constant. It wasn't much, but it was something, a thread of direction we can hold on to. We decided right then that, come morning, we'd have to rely on our instincts, the sun by day and the stars by night, to find our way through. That night, yes, had slept well. I sat up stiffly, stretching my back, and looked around at the others. Pale faces, dark under eyes, the kind of weariness that comes not just from lack of sleep, but from the weight of worry. Mark broke the silence first, poking at the fire with a stick. "We can't just sit here, waiting to get lucky," he muttered. "We head east. Sun's rising there. If we keep a steady line, we'll hit the river eventually. Rivers lead to towns, right?" His voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. Sarah nodded, brushing dew from her hair, though I could see she wasn't fully convinced. Emily, the quietest of us, just stared at her boots, lips pressed together like she was weighing every possible outcome. After a quick breakfast of granola bars and lukewarm water, we packed camp and shouldered our bags. The trail we'd come in on vanished almost immediately into a tangle of brush, so we picked a direction, east, following the sunrise, and stepped into the unknown. The woods closed around us fast. Branches scraped at our packs, and thick undergrowth tugged at our boots. Every so often, we'd find the faint impression of a game trail and follow it for a while, only to lose it again in the ferns and moss. By midday, the sun was high and hot, and the forest floor steamed with humidity. The air was so thick, it felt like breathing through a damp cloth. We stopped at a fallen log for a rest, our shirts clinging with sweat. Sarah tried to lighten the mood. "Hey, at least we're not lost. We know east is east." Mark just grunted, taking a long pull from his water bottle. But as we pressed on, I couldn't shake the feeling we were circling. Trees I swore I recognized from earlier loomed again in front of us, their bark scarred with the same pale lichen. Emily finally spoke up, her voice trembling. What if we've been walking in loops?" None of us wanted to admit it. but her words hit hard. Without a map or compass, every step we took was based on faith in the sky above and our own shaky instincts. Late in the afternoon, clouds began to build and growling through the night like some restless animal prowling around our camp. Rain hammered the tents, seeping through seams no matter how tightly we tugged the zippers. I lay there, listening, each clap of thunder rattling the air in my chest, and I thought about how small and soft we really were out here. Just 4 figures, wrapped in thin fabric, surrounded by a wilderness that didn't care whether we made it or not. Sleep came in broken pieces, and when the storm finally quieted, the forest was drowned in silence, save for the steady drip of water from every branch and leaf. Morning revealed a different world. Mist clung low to the ground, curling around tree trunks like smoke, and everything smelled clean, sharp, and heavy with rain. But the relief didn't last long. Our gear was soaked. The ground was a muddy mess, and the trail, if there had been one, was completely gone. We regrouped around a weak fire Mark coaxed from damp twigs, steam hissing from them as they caught. Sarah hunched close to the flames, teeth chattering. "We can't just wander east again. We need a better plan." It was Emily who surprised us. She pointed at the moss on the trees, explaining how it usually grows heavier on the north side. "If we use that along with the sun, we can keep a straighter line. At least straighter than yesterday." Her voice shook at first, but there was a spark of determination there too. Mark gave her a skeptical look, but I clung to that sliver of direction like it was gold. Anything felt better than marching blind. So, after drying what little we could, we packed up again and pushed forward. The storm had left the woods slick and treacherous. Our boots sank into mud, every step sucking at our feet. Low branches slapped wet leaves against our faces, and fallen logs forced us into detours that tested both balance and patience. The forest was alive with post-rain sounds. Frogs croaking from hidden puddles, birds calling sharp and clear through the mist. Every so often, a branch would snap under our weight and crash down, startling through me, almost dizzying, but with it came caution. The clearing stretched far, and the forest on the other side looked even denser than what we'd just come through. We stood there in silence, rainwater dripping from our clothes, mud cakes to our boots, all staring at that open space. Was it salvation, or a false promise leading us deeper into nowhere? We stood at the edge of that clearing like it was a crossroads carved by fate. The ground was soft underfoot, grass bent and broken as though boots or hooves had passed through not long ago. The air felt lighter out there, more open than the tangled forest behind us. But it was the kind of openness that carried risk. Out in the open, we'd lose the tree's cover. Out in the open, we'd be committed to whatever path we chose. Mark was the first to break the silence. He pointed at the trampled grass, his voice tight with urgency. "That's people. It has to be. We follow it and it'll take us somewhere, maybe a campsite, maybe a ranger station." He said it like he needed to convince himself more than us. Sarah wasn't buying it so easily. She folded her arms, eyes narrowed toward the far tree line. "Or it's just deer. We've been walking in circles all day. Why gamble on a trail we can't even prove is human?" The argument flared quick. Emily, to everyone's surprise again, stood straighter than I'd seen her in days. "We said we'd trust the stars. That's the only thing we know for certain. If we wait here until dark, we can set a true course again." Her voice was steady, but but I saw her hands tremble slightly. I found myself caught in the middle, the weight of their stares pressing in, as though I alone had to choose. In the end, I suggested a compromise. We'd rest there, use the clearing to dry our gear in the late afternoon sun, and once the stars came out, we'd compare directions. If the trampled path aligned with the course north or east, we'd follow it. If not, we'd stick to the stars. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it bought us time, and time felt precious. So we spread out was east, comparing it with a faint line of trampled grass. To our amazement, the path seemed to tilt just slightly in the same direction we needed. Excitement flickered through us, cautious but undeniable. Maybe, just maybe, luck was finally leaning our way. We decided then that at first light we'd follow that faint trail. If it was human, it would lead us out. If it was deer, well, at least it was leading us somewhere new, and anywhere felt better than circling the same trees again. That night, I drifted off under the stars, my body sore, but my mind steadier than it had been in days. I clung to one thought as the crickets lulled me to sleep. Sometimes, in the wild, all you need is a sign, no matter how small, to keep hope alive. Dawn broke crisp and clear, the sky brushed in pale pinks and gold. For the first time since we'd left the truck, I felt a sliver of calm. We rose stiffly from our bedrolls, packed gear that was finally dry, and stood facing that faint, trampled path cutting across the clearing. My boots squished in the dew-soaked grass as we stepped onto it, hearts caught between fear and hope. At first, the trail was faint, almost lost in the undergrowth, but as we followed, it began to widen. The grass pressed down more evenly, the ground firmer underfoot. Mark walked at the front, shoulders set, moving like a man convinced this was salvation. Sarah kept glancing around nervously, scanning for the curve of antlers or the sudden dart of a deer. Emily whispered directions to herself, checking every turn against the slant of morning light, making sure we weren't veering too far from east. Hours passed, the forest slowly changing. The trees grew taller, straighter, the underbrush thinning. Birds flitted overhead, and once we startled a rabbit that bolted into the brush. Then, just when I felt my legs turning to lead, we heard it. Faint at first, then unmistakable. The sound of running water. Our heads snapped up, and all at once, energy surged through us. We pushed forward, the path dipping slightly, until the trees opened to reveal a river. Mud-streaked faces, the weariness in our steps, and just chuckled softly. "You kids lose your way?" he asked. We all laughed, loud, tired, and wild with the joy of it. Yes, we had lost our way, but somehow, by instinct, by stars, and maybe a bit of luck, we had found it again. That night, safe by a fire we didn't have to tend, bellies full of hot food, I thought about the map still sitting useless on the truck's dashboard. Out here, it might have been a comfort, but it wasn't what had carried us through. It was trust, sometimes shaky, sometimes strained, but real. Trust in the sky, trust in each other, and trust that even when the path seems lost, the forest will offer a way forward if you keep walking. And that, I realized, is the truth of the wild. You don't conquer it. You listen, you follow, and if you're lucky, it leads you home.